Hey everyone, it's Rob. We're continuing to look at our study of Revelation Revealed. The idea behind this series is to ask questions of what does the book of Revelation say? How does it help us understand contemporary issues in our society and our culture, etc.? And I'm not sure that you're going to like all the conclusions that I give, but I want to challenge us to begin to think more critically about the way empire works. So I asked two questions in the first part, and that first question was, have we been deceived? Unless we're willing to answer that question with possibly, it's not going to do any good. We're not going to go anywhere. We stop and go. As soon as somebody critiques what we have to say, we immediately critique and respond back because we know that we have not been deceived. They have been deceived. The second question is, have we misread Jesus? And I said we're not going to answer that question in this particular session. But the reason why that's an important question, because what we do is we come to accept a particular understanding of something, whether it's an ethical issue, a moral issue, a political issue, a social issue, an economic issue. And then we end up rereading Jesus in light of that. So we've come to embrace an understanding of Jesus that corresponds to what we believe with regard to this issue or that issue. And what that does is it reinforces our conviction that we're right on this issue, because even Jesus said so. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way we've gone about everything and that we've read everything wrong about Jesus, but I do think for a large part we've been duped by the empire. So just today, this came out and said Trump's EPA now says greenhouse gases don't endanger people. Now, what I want us to do is to go, why would they say that? They could be right. Previous administration said they're not right. This is now a recalibration of what we think. But as we start reading the article, we think, well, wait a minute. Look what it says here. Today is the greatest day of deregulation our nation has seen. We are driving a dagger straight into the heart of climate change religion to drive down the cost of living for American families, unleash American energy, bring auto jobs back to the US, and more. We might stop and go, that sounds great. After all, lower costs, more energy, more jobs, win-win. But is it about money? So let me go ahead and see if I can put a conclusion on our study of the book of Revelation so far. We haven't done a complete study of the whole book, but here's the first point. Number one, it was written to the 7 churches. Secondly, the story centers around the scroll and how God's will is going to be accomplished. Third, the contents of the scroll are going to be delayed. Remember, only Jesus is worthy to open the scroll. The Christ is the center of the story. I'm not skipping that. That's central to the whole story. But for our sakes, we want to focus on the scroll and its contents. We go on then to find that during the delay, God's people will suffer. It's through the faithful, loving, sacrificial living of the people of God that the nations are redeemed. And then here's the key parts. During the delay, the dragon wages war against God's people. He does so by empowering 2 beasts to do his bidding. The beast's primary weapon then is propaganda. The second beast is even called the false prophet. And he's really, really good at it. Now, there are consequences for not listening to the beast. Namely, of course, for not listening to the beast, there'll be punishment and perhaps even death. Or more significantly, the lure of food, clothing, and shelter. Or for our generation, or for our world in the Western world, is prosperity, comfort, power, and privilege. Now, the significance of this is the fact that the Western church has got to grapple with the massive wealth that we have in our own lives and in our churches. How do we reconcile that with the words of Jesus? Haven't gone there yet. How do we reconcile that with the fact that the book of Revelation tells us that this is the lure of Babylon? How do we reconcile this with the fact that the book of Revelation says that when we are attracted to power and pleasure and comfort and privilege, we become the harlot Babylon? I don't think we can do that very easily. Now, a number of years ago, Major General Smedley Butler wrote a book called War is a Racket. It's been reprinted several times. I don't actually remember the first year that the book came out. What's interesting is that Smedley Butler was one of the most decorated U.S. Marines in history. And he famously admitted after his retirement that much of his military career had been spent advancing the corporate interests rather than defending freedom. And I've alluded to this a few times, and maybe I've said it explicitly. It's not so much the empire, it's the corporations that are driving the empire. The modern world is not the same as the Roman world. In the Roman world, the empire controlled all. In the modern world, the corporations control the empires largely. Now, Smedley Butler detailed some of his views in his book, War is a Racket. And here's some of the things that he had to say. He said, I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service. And during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. By the time this particular video goes live, we will have done a number of live streams that I put under the Revelation Revealed series, in which we've interviewed scholars and practitioners on the history of the United States and its involvement in Central America. I really strongly encourage you to go back to the Determinetruth YouTube page, look under the playlist Revelation Revealed, and watch those interviews. Because again, what it says to us is the United States is not always the good guy. And some of the times, the things that we've done in these countries are because of corporate interests. We've done radically, seriously gross injustice in these countries. And then you bring up the question of immigration. Why are they coming to our country? A lot of it is because what we did in their country. We impoverished their country. We empowered the gangs, and we drove the people out. And they came here to find asylum, and then we put them in Alligator Alcatraz. I think there's more to it. And again, I'm not giving us a full answer to the issues of immigration. I'm simply saying we need to raise the question and not just buy and accept everything the empire does, everything the empire tells us because, oh, the empire is good. Now, I'd like to discuss a little bit more about the nature of deception because this is the key weapon of the empire. And the first thing I want to point out is that deception is usually built on truth. For example, some of the immigrants are criminals. It's true. So we look at it and go, our state, our nation has to get rid of these criminals. They're undermining our society. They're endangering us. They're eating our cats and dogs. We'll talk about that later. And they're a danger. And what I'm suggesting is, okay, maybe that's true. That's great. Every country has a responsibility to have secure borders. But should we be putting them in privatized detention centers? Should we be putting them in Alligator Alcatraz? Should we be putting them in places where their civil rights are not acknowledged, where their human dignity is not respected? We have to think about this. Another example, when it comes to poverty. Poverty is the result of laziness and high crimes. Poverty is the result of a lot of things. That's true, in other words. Again, deception is usually built on truth. Okay, some poverty is the result of laziness. Some poverty is the result of crime. But poverty is a result of a lot of things. Poor education is number one. Unless if we're going to blame the issue on laziness, let's address poverty for what it really is. The number one factor leading to poverty is poor education. If we want to solve the poverty problem, we need to figure out how to fund the schools. But instead we've said, oh, they're lazy, that's why they're poor. Oh, guess what? We're not going to fund their schools. The government has cut billions of dollars as I speak in July of 2025. I know this will go live later on, a couple months from now. The government has restricted the public schools from access to billions of dollars that have already been approved for education for students in need. We can go even further because one of the big factors that created a lot of the poverty in America was the housing issue. And our housing issue was seriously racially motivated. We won't get into it now, but look at redlining and the history of redlining and figure out what the United States government did. They wouldn't give loans to people of color. And if a person of color moved into your neighborhood, the valuation of your neighborhood dropped. A lot of the poverty was created by us, by the government. It wasn't their fault. And then we fund the public schools with property taxes. Lower property taxes in the poor inner city communities, and therefore poorer schools. Wealthy communities have well-funded schools. That's not right. Every child deserves the right to an equal education. Let me give some more examples. We justify the genocide in Gaza because Israel has a right to defend itself. Every deception is built on truth. Does it have a right to defend itself to the point at which it utterly ethnically cleanses Gaza? Does it have a right to defend itself by shooting at people queuing up for food? Does it have a right to defend itself by turning off gas, water, and electricity? By limiting all food and aid so that kids have to have limbs severed without anesthesia? Is that defending yourself? And we have all these arguments as to why it is. Hamas is in the hospitals. We have to bomb all the hospitals. Folks, Hamas wasn't in all the hospitals. And even if they were, you can't bomb a hospital. If a terrorist walked into a school with a gun and we said, just bomb the school because there's a terrorist inside. Folks, you can't bomb the school when there's a terrorist inside because there's kids in there. You can't bomb a hospital just because Hamas is in there. And guess what? Hamas wasn't in most, if not all, of the hospitals. Deception is built on truth. But the next problem becomes that deception is often in what we're not told. I've been working on the issue of Israel-Palestine for about 16, 17 or more years now. And one of the first things that happened, one of the first reasons why I began to be involved was because I went to the land and I saw for myself. And my first reaction was, this is not what I've been told. And I can't tell you how many countless advocates come back and say, I went to the land and saw it myself. And what I saw is not what we've been told. A couple of years ago, I was preparing for one of my classes and I was going to discuss the Pax Romana for a moment. And I thought, well, let me bring up a site, see if there's some information on Google search that will help us understand what Pax Romana is all about. And I was amazed when I brought up a page on a Google search. You can see I typed in Pax Romana here on Google. The Pax Romana, meaning the Roman peace, refers to a roughly 200-year period of relative peace. I didn't highlight that, they did. Relative peace and stability in the Roman Empire from 27 BCE to 180 CE. This era saw significant expansion, economic prosperity, cultural flourishing, with the spread of Roman law, language, and customs across a vast territory. And I began to go, what? You got to be kidding me. And I kept searching for other sites to see what came up, how ancient Rome thrived during the Pax Romana, how Pax was Romana. Okay, there you go. Pax Romana definition. What was life like during the Pax Romana? Look, the Pax Romana was a time of great achievement, relative peace within the Roman Empire. Romans no longer fought one another by and large. Now, there might be more information on these links if you click on them, and I did click on them, and I'm like, okay, it's not completely saying this, but I was amazed that the description of the Pax Romana was a description of peace and stability and expansion, and economic prosperity. What are you talking about? The Pax Romana was built on the back of death, of war, of savagery, of violence, of crucifixions, of rape and pillaging. Millions of people died because of the Romans. Very few people benefited, and those who did benefited at the expense of everybody else. This is what empire does. It builds its propaganda partly on what is true, but it's what it's not telling us that's a bigger problem. Now, I'll have one more video in this series, that's the plan at least, in which we're going to discuss a little bit further the nature of deception, the nature of propaganda, the nature of the way the beast operates and how it lures and seduces us. And what I'm trying to do again here is ask questions or raise questions and raise concerns. How, for example, can we justify the massive, immense wealth in our churches in light of what Jesus said about the gospel and the kingdom? And we'll look at that more in our next episode.